My name is Father Marcus Varelli, and I've been a demonologist for the Vatican for 12 years. People think my job involves dramatic exorcisms and flying furniture, but most of my work happens in fluorescent-lit offices with filing cabinets full of incident reports. The real horror isn't what you'd expect. It started 3 months ago when Cardinal Luciano called me into his office. He looked tired, older than his 68 years. A stack of manila folders sat on his desk, each one marked with a red stamp I'd never seen before. "Father Varelli, we have a problem," he said, sliding the first folder across his mahogany desk. "Cases are changing. The rules we've followed for centuries aren't working anymore." I opened the folder. Inside was a police report from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A family of 4 had called 911, claiming their television was broadcasting programs that hadn't aired yet, not reruns, actual future episodes. The responding officers found the family huddled in their basement, refusing to come upstairs. When they checked the TV, it was showing the weather forecast for next Tuesday. It was currently Thursday. "This doesn't match any documented case," Cardinal Luciano continued. "No possession markers, no traditional signs, just this." He handed me a laminated card. 5 simple rules were typed in black ink. Do not watch anything the television shows after midnight. If you hear knocking, count the knocks. Odd numbers mean don't answer. Check your reflection in every mirror. Before leaving a room, red candles must be extinguished immediately. If a child asks about their imaginary friend's real name, leave the building. "Where did these come from?" I asked. "That's what you're going to find out," he said. Every case in that stack follows these same rules. Different families, different cities, different countries, but always these 5 rules. I flipped through the folders. Phoenix, Arizona. A grandmother started receiving phone calls from her deceased husband, but only during her grandson's violin practice. Dublin, Ireland. A bookstore owner found customers buying books that didn't exist, paying with currency from countries that had been defunct for decades. São Paulo, Brazil. A priest reported that his church bells rang every hour except 3 a.m., and during that silent hour, people would gather outside and just stand there. Each case file contained the same laminated rule card. "Have you tried ignoring the rules?" I asked. Cardinal Luciano's face went pale. "Read the Tokyo file. I found it near the bottom of the stack. A Japanese businessman named Hiroshi had received the rules after his apartment started rearranging itself every night. He'd wake up to find his furniture moved, his kitchen utensils sorted by size, his books alphabetized. The rules appeared on his kitchen table one morning. Hiroshi thought the rules were ridiculous. He deliberately broke Rule 1, staying up past midnight to watch his television. According to his neighbors, they heard him laughing at first, then screaming. When police broke down his door, they found him sitting cross-legged in front of his TV, eyes wide open, not blinking. He'd been dead for 16 hours. The television was showing a program about his own death. "The rules aren't suggestions, Cardinal," Luciano said quietly. "They're protective measures, but we don't know who's making them or why they're spreading." I spent the next week reviewing every file. The pattern was always the same. Strange events would begin happening to ordinary people. Within 72 hours, they'd find the rule cards somewhere in their home. Those who followed the rules continued living normal lives, just with these odd restrictions. Those who broke them, well, let me tell you about the Melbourne case. Dr. Eleanor Shaw was a psychiatrist who prided herself on logic and reason. When her patients started talking about seeing her in their dreams not as herself, but as a completely different person, she dismissed it as mass hysteria. Then she found the rule card in her office filing cabinet. She broke Rule 3. According to her nurse, Dr. Shaw had gone to the bathroom between appointments. She came out 15 minutes later, but something was different. She walked differently, held her head at an odd tilt, and kept asking people to repeat their names, then though she'd known them for years. The nurse said it was like Dr. Shaw was wearing someone else's personality, like an uncomfortable suit. Dr. Shaw's husband found her that night, standing in their bedroom, staring at the mirror. When he asked what she was doing, she turned around and smiled with too many teeth. "I'm checking," she said, "but I can't find myself in there anymore." They found her body the next morning. The mirror was shattered, and written in the glass fragments were the words, "She forgot to look at," called Cardinal Luciano after reading that file. "Your Eminence, these aren't demonic possessions," I said. "This is something else entirely." "I know," he replied. "That's why you're going to Milwaukee first." The family from the initial report, the Garcias, they're still alive, still following the rules. I want you to interview them, and then you're going to find out where those rules came from. The flight to Milwaukee took 4 hours. I used the time to memorize every detail of the Garcia case. Carlos and Sofia Garcia, both in their 40s, lived with their 2 children, Maria, 12, and Luis, 8. Carlos worked at a paper mill. Sofia taught kindergarten. They were ordinary people living an ordinary life, until their television started showing them tomorrow. Their house was a modest 2-story, colonial, in a quiet neighborhood. Carlos answered the door before I could knock. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in months. "Father Varelli, we've been expecting you." The living room felt normal except for one thing. The television was unplugged and turned to face the wall. "We don't watch it anymore," Sofia explained when she saw me looking. "Not since we found the rules." Their daughter Maria sat at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when I entered. "Are you here about the TV man?" she asked. "The TV man?" Carlos and Sofia exchanged glances. "Maria thinks she sees someone in the reflection of the blank screen sometimes," Sofia said, "even when it's unplugged." "What does he look like?" I asked. Maria scrunched up her face, thinking, "Like a regular person, but backwards. He wears our clothes, but they're inside out. He waves, but with the wrong hand." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How often do you see him?" "Every day at 3:15, she said matter-of-factly. "That's when I get home from school. He's always there waiting. But I don't wave back, because Mommy said not to talk to strangers, even TV strangers." That evening, I sat with the family as they followed their routine. At 11:45 p.m., they all went upstairs. At midnight exactly, I heard the television turn on downstairs. I didn't go look. Rule 1 was very clear, but I could hear it playing something, voices I almost recognized, music that sounded familiar but slightly off-key. It played for exactly 1 hour, then clicked off. The next morning, Carlos looked exhausted. "Did you hear it last night?" he asked over coffee. "Yes. It was playing our conversation from yesterday," he said quietly. "But in the show, you never came to visit." In the show, Maria talked to the TV man. In the show, he stopped talking and stared into his mug. "What happened in the show, Carlos?" She disappeared into the screen, and the TV man took her place. I spent 3 more days with the Garcias, documenting everything. The rules weren't just protection, they were a barrier between their reality and something else. Something that wanted in. On my last day, 8-year-old Luis asked me a question that made my blood freeze. "Father, do you want to meet my imaginary friend? His real name is Marcus, just like yours." I was out of that house and on a plane back to Rome within 2 hours. Cardinal Luciano was waiting for me in his office with more files. "How many cases now?" I asked. 437, he said. "All following the same 5 rules. All starting the same way: small disruptions in normal life, then the rules appear. Your Eminence, I think we're dealing with something that's trying to replace our reality with its own. Explain." I pulled out my notes from Milwaukee. The Garcias' television shows them variations of their own lives. Maria sees someone who looks human but isn't quite right. Luce's imaginary friend shares my name. It's like something is studying us, learning how to be us. Cardinal Luciano nodded grimly. I've reached the same conclusion. The question is, what do we do about it? We need to find the source, I said. Every rule card is identical, same paper, same font, same lamination. Someone or something is producing them. I have a lead, he said, sliding another folder across the desk. Vatican City, last week. I opened the file and felt the world tilt. Sister Isabella Rossi, librarian at the Vatican Secret Archives, had found a rule card in the Borgia collection, not a modern laminated card, but an original manuscript dating back to 1503, written in Latin. The same 5 rules, translated into ancient text. It's been here for 500 years, Cardinal Luciano said quietly. We just never knew what it meant. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't new. This had been happening for centuries, maybe longer. The rules weren't appearing randomly. They were being activated. There's more, Cardinal Luciano continued. Sister Rossi found references in texts dating back to the Roman Empire. Different languages, different cultures, but always the same 5 protective measures. Against what? That's what you're going to find out. I'm giving you full access to the archives. Find every reference, every connection. We need to understand what we're really dealing with. I spent the next 2 weeks buried in manuscripts that hadn't seen daylight in centuries. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in chemical baths. Roman texts described households that received divine instructions during times of plague and chaos. Medieval chronicles mentioned protective rites that appeared during the Black Death. Renaissance alchemists wrote about barriers against the changing tide. Every era, every culture, the same 5 rules appeared whenever reality started to become flexible. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Father Moretti, our specialist in pre-Columbian religions, found me in the archives at 2 a.m., surrounded by stacks of ancient books. Marcus, you need to see this, he said, carrying a stone tablet. Mayan, approximately 900 AD. The tablet showed 5 symbols carved in jade. When Father Moretti translated them, I understood why he'd sought me out immediately. The symbols matched our 5 rules exactly. It's not just European, he said. This pattern exists in every culture we've studied: Aztec codices, Egyptian papyrus, Buddhist scrolls from Tibet. Always 5 rules, always the same protective function. Protection from what? Father Moretti pointed to another symbol on the tablet, something that looked like a doorway with cracks spreading out from its frame. From something trying to get in, he said. Something that's been trying for a very, very long time. That night, I called Cardinal Luciano. Your Eminence, I think I understand what's happening. These aren't random supernatural events. Something is testing the boundaries between realities, and the rules are humanity's immune response. Go on. Every time this thing pushes too hard, reality pushes back by providing people with protective guidelines. The rules aren't being created, they're being remembered. There was silence on the other end of the line. Cardinal Marcus, I need you to return to my office immediately. Something has happened. I found him standing at his window, looking out at St. Peter's Square. In his hand was a fresh rule card. Where did you find it? I asked. On my desk when I returned from evening prayers. His voice was steady, but I could see his hands shaking. Marcus, it's starting here, in the Vatican itself. I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. In the square below, tourists were taking pictures of statues that weren't there yesterday. Street vendors were selling postcards of St. Peter's Basilica with 7 spires instead of 1. Children were feeding pigeons that cast no reflections in the fountain water. Rome was changing, and we had 5 rules to keep us sane while it happened. Cardinal Luciano turned to face me. I need you to prepare a report for the Holy Father. Everything we've learned, everything we suspect, because I don't think this stops with individual families anymore. What do you mean? He walked to his desk and picked up a leather-bound journal. I've been tracking the cases geographically. Look at the pattern. He showed me a world map covered in red pins. The pins formed a spiral pattern, starting from scattered points and slowly converging on major population centers. It's not random, he said. It's systematic. And according to this progression, every major city on Earth will be affected within 6 months. I stared at the map, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. It's not trying to replace individual realities, I said slowly. It's trying to replace all of reality. Cardinal Luciano nodded. And we're the only ones who know how to fight it. The weight of that knowledge settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. 5 simple rules were all that stood between humanity and something that wanted to remake the world in its own image. As I prepared to leave his office, Cardinal Luciano stopped me at the door. Marcus, there's something else. When I found the rule card tonight, it wasn't the only thing on my desk. He handed me a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. This appeared next to it. It's written in multiple languages, Greek, Aramaic, languages I don't even recognize. I opened the journal carefully. The first page was in Latin, written in what looked like medieval script. The 5th cycle begins when mirrors show tomorrow, and children speak with voices not their own 5th cycle. I asked. Keep reading. I flipped through the pages. Each entry was dated, but the dates made no sense. Some were from centuries ago, others from years in the future, but all described the same pattern. Reality becoming fluid, protective rules appearing, and then nothing. Each cycle's entries just stopped. What happened to the people who wrote this? Cardinal Luciano pointed to the final entry, written in modern English, Day 127. The rules no longer hold. We see ourselves walking in the streets, living our lives, but we know we are not them, and they are not us. Tomorrow, I will check my reflection one last time. If I am not there, burn this journal. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. At the bottom of the page was a signature. Father Antonio Bianchi, Vatican City, 1954. I knew Father Bianchi, Cardinal Luciano said quietly. He disappeared in 1954. We assumed he'd lost his faith and left the priesthood, but according to Vatican records, he never left the building. He was seen in the halls, attending masses, performing his duties, but other priests said he was different, like someone wearing his face who didn't quite know how to use it. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. The same thing that happened to Dr. Shaw in Melbourne. Exactly. And now it's happening again, but this time, it's bigger, faster. As if summoned by our conversation, every church bell in Vatican City began ringing at once. But they weren't chiming the hour. They were ringing in sequence, like a countdown. 10 rings, 9, 8. Marcus, Cardinal Luciano said, looking out the window. What do you see in St. Peter's Square? I joined him at the window. At first, everything looked normal: tourists taking photographs, street vendors selling souvenirs, pigeons pecking at crumbs. But then I noticed the details. The tourists were taking pictures of the same statue, from the exact same angle. The vendors were selling souvenirs from countries that didn't exist. The pigeons were flying in perfect formation, like they were following invisible guidelines. 7, 6, 5. Everyone's following a script, I whispered. Not everyone, Cardinal Luciano said, pointing to a small girl near the fountain. She was maybe 7 years old, standing perfectly still while chaos moved around her. While everyone else repeated their programmed actions, she was staring directly up at our window, staring at us. 432. The girl raised her hand and waved at the enthusiastic wave of a child, but the deliberate, measured gesture of someone much older, much more calculating. 1. The bells stopped. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The girl in the square was still waving, still staring, and now I could see that her lips were moving, like she was saying something. Can you read lips? I asked Cardinal Luciano. He squinted. I think she's saying Rule 5. Rule 5. If a child asks about their imaginary friend's real name, leave the building. But she wasn't asking about an imaginary friend. She was the imaginary friend? Your Eminence, we need to leave now. Wait. He grabbed my arm. Look at her reflection in the fountain. I looked. The girl's reflection was there, but it was wrong. The reflection was waving with her left hand, while the real girl used her right. The reflection was smiling, while the real girl's face remained serious. And the reflection was wearing different clothes, a white dress instead of the red jacket the real girl wore. The reflection is what she really looks like, Cardinal Luciano said. What we're seeing is the disguise. That's when I realized something that made my blood freeze. If the reflection showed the truth, then I needed to check my own reflection. Rule 3. Check your reflection in every mirror before leaving a room. I turned to the large mirror hanging behind Cardinal Luciano's desk. My reflection stared back at me. Normal in every way except one. It was wearing the robes of a cardinal, not a priest. Your Eminence, I said carefully. What do you see when you look at me? He turned around. I see Father Marcus Varelli, same as always. Why? I pointed at the mirror. What does my reflection look like? Cardinal Luciano looked at the mirror, then back at me, then at the mirror again. His face went pale. That's not possible, he whispered. In the mirror, my reflection was smiling a smile I wasn't making. It raised its hand in a small wave, the same gesture the girl in the square had made, and around its neck, instead of a simple priest's collar, it wore the red robes and cap of a cardinal. Marcus, how long have you been working for me? 12 years, Your Eminence. You know that, but I don't remember promoting you to cardinal. I looked down at my own closed black priest's robes, just as they'd always been. But in the mirror, I watched myself adjust red cardinal vestments that I couldn't feel wearing. Something's wrong with my reflection, I said. Or something's wrong with you, Cardinal Luciano replied, backing away from me slowly. That's when I understood the true horror of what we were dealing with. It wasn't just replacing people from the outside. It was replacing them from the inside, piece by piece, memory by memory. The reflection showed what I was becoming, not what I was. Your Eminence, I'm still me. The mirror is showing the change before it happens. How can I be sure? I thought quickly. Ask me something only the real Marcus would know. Something personal. Cardinal Luciano studied my face. What did you call me when you were first assigned to my department before you learned proper protocol? I smiled, remembering Uncle Leo, because you reminded me of my Uncle Leonardo, back in Boston. You made me call you Your Eminence for 3 months straight, as punishment. Cardinal Luciano relaxed slightly. It's still you, but Marcus, if your reflection is changing, that means the replacement process has already started. We need to figure out how to stop it. I looked at the mirror again. My reflection waved once more, then pointed toward the window. In the square below, the little girl was gone, but standing in her place was a man in red cardinal robes who looked exactly like my reflection. It's not just changing me, I said. It's using me as a template to create more. Cardinal Luciano grabbed the ancient journal and thrust it into my hands. Father Bianchi wrote about this. Read the entries from day 89 onward. I flipped to the section he indicated. The handwriting became more frantic with each entry. Day 89, saw myself leaving the Vatican library, but I was still inside reading. When I followed to investigate, the other me was gone. Day 94, 3 priests reported seeing me in the chapel during morning prayers. I was asleep in my cell at that time. Day 101, Cardinal Moretti asked why I missed our meeting yesterday. I never scheduled a meeting with Cardinal Moretti. Day 108, found my own signature on documents I never signed. The handwriting is perfect, but I have no memory of writing these reports. Day 115, Looked in the mirror this morning. My reflection saluted me. I did not salute back. The entries continued, describing a gradual replacement process. The other, Bianchi, became more real, while the original became less substantial until finally, the original started forgetting pieces of his own life. Day 123. Cannot remember my mother's maiden name. Cannot remember the name of my childhood dog. Cannot remember why I became a priest. The other me seems to know all these things that I have forgotten. It's not just copying us, I said, looking up from the journal. It's transferring our memories, our experiences, our entire existence, to the replacements. We're not being killed. We're being downloaded. Cardinal Luciano sat heavily in his chair, and once the transfer is complete, I read the final entry. Day 127. The rules no longer hold. We see ourselves walking in the streets, living our lives, but we know we are not them, and they are not us. The original becomes a ghost, I said, aware but powerless, watching their replacement live their life. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our situation settling over us. Outside, Rome continued its normal rhythm, unaware that reality was being quietly rewritten around them. Marcus, we need to contact the other dioceses immediately. If this process has started with you here, it's probably starting with other key personnel worldwide. He opened his laptop and began composing urgent messages to church officials around the globe. But as he typed, something on the screen made him stop. Marcus, come look at this. The email program showed his sent messages, but there were emails there that he hadn't written. Messages sent to various cardinals and archbishops, all with timestamps from the past hour. Father Varelli has been compromised. Do not trust any communications from the Vatican. New protocols are in effect immediately. Disregard all previous instructions regarding the 5 rules. The situation is under control. Continue normal operations and ignore any unusual reports. I didn't send these, Cardinal Luciano said, his voice shaking. I looked at his reflection in the computer screen. Like mine, it was different from the original. While Cardinal Luciano wore his usual black cassock, his reflection wore the white robes of the Pope. Your Eminence, I said quietly, I think we need to follow Rule 5. What do you mean? The rule says, if a child asks about their imaginary friend's real name, leave the building. But what if we're the imaginary friends? What if the real Cardinal Luciano and the real Father Varelli are somewhere else, and we're the ones who aren't real? Cardinal Luciano stared at me, then at his own reflection, then back at me. If that's true, he said slowly, then following the rules won't save us. The rules are designed to protect the real people from us. The thought was terrifying, but it made sense. We remembered being ourselves, but memories could be copied. We felt real, but feelings could be simulated. The only way to know for sure was to find the original versions of ourselves. Where would they be? I asked. Cardinal Luciano closed his laptop and stood up. I know exactly where to look. He led me through corridors I'd never seen before, deeper into the Vatican than I'd ever been. We passed through doors that required keys I didn't know he possessed, down staircases that seemed to spiral forever into the earth below Rome. Your Eminence, where are we going? The real archives, he said without looking back. Not the tourist version upstairs. The place where we keep the things that can't be explained. We descended for what felt like 20 minutes before reaching a heavy wooden door marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Cardinal Luciano pressed his palm against a scanner hidden behind a false stone in the wall. The door clicked open. Beyond was a room that defied the architecture of everything above it. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls were lined with filing cabinets that seemed to go on forever. But it wasn't the size that made my breath catch. It was the people. Dozens of figures sat at desks throughout the room writing in journals, reading from ancient books, copying texts by hand. They all wore clerical clothing from different eras, medieval robes, Renaissance vestments, modern cassocks, and they all looked exactly like priests and cardinals I recognized from upstairs. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The repository," Cardinal Luciano replied. "When the replacement process begins, the originals end up here. They continue their work, but they're cut off from the world above. They remember their lives, but they can't affect them anymore." As we walked deeper into the room, I saw faces I knew. Father Alvarez from the Madrid Cathedral, who'd supposedly died in a car accident last year. Archbishop Thompson from London, who'd been reported missing 6 months ago. Sister Gabriella from the archives, who'd taken a leave of absence that never ended. They all looked up as we passed, their expressions curious but not surprised, like they'd been expecting us. "Marcus," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see a man who looked exactly like me, down to the scar on my left hand from a childhood accident. He was sitting at a desk covered with the same case files I'd been studying upstairs. "You're the original," I said. He nodded. "I've been here for 3 days, ever since you started appearing in my place. I've been trying to figure out how to get back, but the rules don't work down here. This place exists outside their protection." I approached his desk. The files he was working on contained cases I'd never seen, incidents from the past week that my replacement self had apparently been investigating. "What's happening up there?" the original Marcus asked. "The replacement process is accelerating. More people are being copied every day. We found evidence that this has been going on for centuries." "Not centuries," said another familiar voice. I turned to see Cardinal Luciano, the real one, approaching from deeper in the room. He looked older than the version upstairs, more tired, but his eyes held a clarity that the replacement lacked. "Millennia," he continued. "This room has existed since the founding of the church. Every time reality becomes unstable, originals end up here while copies take their place above." "But why?" I asked. "What's the purpose?" The real Cardinal Luciano gestured for us to follow him to a section of the room I hadn't noticed before. Here, the walls were covered with maps, diagrams, and photographs spanning centuries of incidents. "It's not random," he explained. "The replacements aren't just copying us. They're preparing for something. Each cycle, they gather more knowledge, more resources, more influence. They're building toward a final event." He pointed to a large map of the world covered in red pins. "Every replacement, every rule card, every incident, they're all connected. The entity behind this isn't just trying to replace individual people. It's trying to replace the entire structure of reality." "How?" the original Marcus asked. "Through faith," Cardinal Luciano replied. "Think about it. Who do people trust more than anyone else? Who do they turn to when they're afraid, when they need guidance, when reality itself seems to be breaking down?" The implication hit me like a physical blow. "Religious leaders." "Exactly. By replacing key figures in every major religion worldwide, the entity can control how humanity responds to supernatural events. When people follow the 5 rules, they're not just protecting themselves. They're participating in a massive ritual." I stared at the map, understanding dawning. "The rules aren't protection. They're part of the process." "Rule 1, the original Marcus said, reading from his notes. "Do not watch anything the television shows after midnight." "But what if midnight is when the entity needs people to be asleep, unaware of what's happening around them?" "Rule 2, I continued. "If you hear knocking, count the knocks. Odd numbers mean don't answer." "But what if the knocking is people trying to warn others, and the odd numbers are code for danger?" Cardinal Luciano nodded grimly. "Rule 3, check your reflection in every mirror before leaving a room, ensuring people become obsessed with their reflections, making them more susceptible to replacement." Rule 4, red candles must be extinguished immediately. Red candles are used in protective rituals. Extinguishing them removes actual protection. And Rule 5. The original mark is finished. If a child asks about their imaginary friend's real name, leave the building. Children are often the first to see through the deception. The rule makes adults abandon them when they try to warn people. The real Cardinal Luciano walked to a large chart covered in dates and locations. Every 73 years, the replacement process accelerates dramatically. We're in the acceleration phase now. In 6 days the Feast of Saint Michael, the Archangel, the entity will attempt its final push. What happens then? Every major religious leader on earth will be a replacement. When they speak, when they guide their congregations, when they interpret divine will, it won't be human wisdom. It will be the entity's influence, channeled through familiar faces. I studied the chart more closely. What can we do to stop it? That's what we've been working on down here, said a voice I recognized as Sister Gabriella. She approached, carrying a thick folder. We've identified the source. She opened the folder to reveal photographs of a location I didn't recognize, a stone chamber with 5 mirrors arranged in a pentagon pattern. The Chamber of Reflections, she explained. It's located beneath the Sistine Chapel. The mirrors aren't just reflecting our reality, they're windows to the entity's realm. Every replacement is born from these mirrors. Why hasn't anyone sealed it? I asked. Because officially, it doesn't exist, Cardinal Luciano replied. The replacement cardinals have erased it from all records. Only we remember it now. The original Marcus stood up from his desk. There's more. We've discovered that the 5 rules aren't just controlling people's behavior. They're creating a resonance pattern. When millions of people follow the same 5 rules simultaneously, their collective compliance creates a frequency that weakens the barrier between realities. Like a key, I said. Exactly. And on St. Michael's feast day, when the church celebrates the defeat of evil, the replaced religious leaders will guide their followers in a special global prayer that incorporates all 5 rules into a single ritual. Sister Gabriella showed me another photograph, this one of a document written in Latin. The ritual prayer was discovered in Father Bianchi's belongings after his replacement in 1954. It looks like a traditional blessing, but embedded within it are instructions for people to perform actions that mirror the 5 rules. I read the translation. Let us turn away from the illumination of night's end. Rule 1. Let us count our blessings in sacred numbers. Rule 2. Let us see ourselves as we truly are. Rule 3. Let us extinguish the fires of the past. Rule 4. Let us silence the innocent voices that lead us astray. Rule 5. When spoken by religious leaders and followed by millions of believers simultaneously. Cardinal Luciano explained, this prayer will complete the entity's takeover of our reality. So how do we stop it? I asked. We have to destroy the mirrors, the original Marcus said. But there's a problem. The Chamber of Reflections can only be entered by someone who exists in both realities. Someone who has been replaced but still retains their original consciousness. I looked around the room at all the origin